Good morning. Welcome to Around the Valuation World. I guess this is the morning show at the conference. Yep, what was it from the Vietnam movie? Hello, NAVCVA. And what was it?
Good morning.
Good morning, NACVA. So yesterday, Brian and I covered things the association is working on, to improve education, some of it in the colleges. We talked a little bit about some programs to help us expand our practices, market ourselves. Today, we're going to get a little more technical and probably back to the valuation and forensic world that we all live in. So that's kind of going to be the direction of today. We've got an awful lot of summaries and things planned. So hopefully it'll be a little bit rapid pace. And I also just really want to thank you all for being here. It's early in the day. I don't know about you, but the weather has been so beautiful. It has certainly made the evenings of the conference wonderful. I was at Wrigley Stadium last night, and quite an experience. It was just really nice. So I hope you all are enjoying your stay here. So Kathy Knapp is co-hosting with me for the first half of the show this morning.
Good morning, Kathy.
Kathy is one of our correspondents. She does a lot of presentations on, you really like practice management and the marketing end. Does a really nice job. It's just, all of our correspondents are just great people to get to work with. I have Mark Bello here. Mark, actually you were involved with the show for an awful long time, and
That's right, till my contract got canceled and you took over.
Yeah, I'm the mean successor guy. Only I thought you sent me thank you letters.
I did, and I'm still paying you.
And so he's going to talk a little bit about what's going on with current update. And then it's going to be followed by Carl Steffen, who's going to talk about the changes in our standards, the NACVA standards. As he was mentioning this to me, as I said to him, I live in terror because it seems like I live in 3 sets of standards, and I have a hard time keeping track of any of them at any one time, much less as they seem to constantly change. So he's going to talk a little bit about our standards, and then we're going to start rotating people, so it should be fun this morning. Mark, would you like to tell us what's going on, what's new in current updates?
Not too much. No, I think when you look at what you've seen so far in the conference, when you talk about current updates, the first thing I'll always go to is what's being published, what's out there, what should we be reading? And, Roger did a great job with cost of capital. Now there's probably, almost 10 books out there of figuring out what you're going to use to develop your cost of capital. You should also look into, if you've used the valuation, is it the valuation workbook? Jim Hitchner's book, he put out his 5th edition.
Handbook.
What is it?
Valuation handbook.
Yeah, the valuation handbook. The 5th edition just came out this year. So, staying with your library, keeping it current is pretty important. And then to obviously my right here, keeping up with standards is also going to be a big factor of current updates and what's going on to make sure you don't get in trouble.
Okay. Carl, would you like to tell us a little bit about what's going on with the standards?
First, the NACVA professional standards has a new effective date, June 1st, 2017. The reason that's a new effective date is we actually made a couple of changes. You're not going to be able to find them. Actually, there were.
That's helpful.
There were 6 changes. I went through and counted them.
It's like, where's Waldo?
Yeah.
You can find this.
There were just some syntax and grammatical changes that were made, but we decided that there's no substantive changes in our standards. One of the things we did Wednesday at our session is we also have updated the comparison chart that's out there with relation to the standards. You may have seen it previously, that compares the NACVA professional standards to the IBA, the USPAP, ASA, and the SSVS standards. What we did there is we now have actually two columns that we laid out for the SSVS standards. One, a column that deals with calculation engagements, and the other being valuation engagements. Hopefully that will be a little more helpful to our members. We also are in the process right now of putting together a comparison chart with respect to the international. In other words, comparing the NACBA professional standards to our international standards, and that includes the IBSC's standards. I always have to look at these, and I can't see. The International Valuation Standards Council, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, which is the RICS in the Red Book, and the Canadian standards. And we provided don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of that.
Okay, that was
It is the first page.
You know, I saw that batch and figured I only had to ask you one question.
Yeah, that's all.
Good.
Yeah, just start me out. Now I'm fine. I'll go for the next few minutes. But we've actually have a draft of it, and we showed a draft to those individuals that were attended Wednesday's session. Now, the interesting thing about the IBSC standards that you may not realize is the AICPA is not only a sponsor, but also a member of the IBSC standards. And that's interesting because their new standards came out in January, and they're effective July 1st. So one of the questions we were trying to ask the AICPA is whether they're going to adopt the IVSC standards, because they not only have a member in the sponsorship, but they actually have members that are on the standards board. Now, from our understanding, they haven't adopted the IVSC standards, but, and I'm not sure whether they need to, because I was looking at the IVSC standards, and it doesn't say that a member, or it doesn't refer that a member is required to adopt the IVSC standards. So it's kind of interesting. It's out there. And so the Red Book, the RIC standards, they actually have adopted the IBSC standards, so that's part of their standards. And then we have the Canadian standards. The last thing we did is we talked a little bit. Well, I'll keep going. If you don't have anything to say, I'll talk.
Well, Greg only gave me 2 minutes. He said,
I said, yeah, I'll talk.
Yeah, but we're going quick, so you got about another minute.
No, okay, that's all right. I could handle. The other thing we did is we took a look at the ethics oversight board to see what issues seem to be coming up with them with regard to what problems do they seem to be seeing all the time. The most interesting thing that we found is that the primary problem that we see are the individuals that have advertised that they have the CVA and don't have the CVA, or may have gotten their CVA and then haven't paid their dues. That's the primary issue. I'll stop now.
Well, thank you both. It was very informative, especially on the standards, Mark. And next, we've got a couple of guests coming up. We're going to talk about fraud. We're going to move into fraud for a bit. Thank you guys so much.
thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck. Hey.
See where I can go to get out of your way.
They removed a section from the couch from yesterday that we didn't realize till we came up here to sit, so.
And for those of you sitting in the front, yes, I did forget my socks, so.
I thought that was just the new style. You're ahead of, you're ahead of
I
us.
was sitting there and I was going, oh man, I forgot
You just
socks
look like
today.
you're ready for summer.
So this,
See, in Oklahoma, they don't wear socks.
they don't even usually
They
wear
can't afford
shoes. So this is TJ Lyles Timms and Howard Zaman, and they are true experts at litigation, and they've been doing some seminars related to it. Howard, I attended, well, and TJ, you're teaching the introductory class? Which class?
The Foundation of Financial Forensics. We've got 9 people in there, and 6 of them will be sitting for the Master Analyst in Financial Forensics.
Fantastic. So,
You're teaching all week? All day.
All week, all day.
so he missed his own course yesterday. But why don't either one of you, tell us a little bit, if someone wants to get started in, the expert witness fields in litigation, how might they start, or how might they take that call from the attorney?
Well, I think TJ and I were talking about this just a little bit. I mean, the first thing is know what you don't know. I think that's important. Don't take on an assignment that you think, oh, I could look at a practice aid, or I could look at a treatise, I could look at Nancy Fannon's book, for instance, or, the Wiley books, and get an understanding of how you can do it and just go ahead and plunge in. Make sure that you have the proper resources when you take on an assignment and understand what's expected of you. I was talking to Greg yesterday, and during my class yesterday as well, we were talking about first things first. I mean, talk to the attorney, get a sense of what the case is about, get a copy of the complaint, and understand what the issues are. And once you do that, you do some background research. Go on a site that I'm talking about and promoting. It's a government site called pacer.gov. In order to get the background and the additional pleadings and whatnot behind the case. Run a conflict check, and then turn it over to TJ so he could do the rest of the work.
It's hard for me to follow that because that was quite the summary in such short period of time. But I would reiterate that we're not experts in everything. Even though we may like to think that we are, we're not. So make sure that it is an area that you are more than comfortable in getting on the stand and testifying to. It is important to make sure, in addition to that you do get all the information. No attorneys are notorious for providing you the information they think that you should have. Not all attorneys are like that, and they don't do it nefariously.
Can you tell me what those are?
What?
The ones that give you all the information, where they are?
Typically, I think I find those, they're on like Politico.com or something like that. So make sure that you get all the information that you feel is necessary, not necessarily the information the attorney thinks is necessary, and make an informed decision.
And with the change in the federal rules over the last number of years in terms of expert relationships and reports and that sort of thing, 26A2B, that has been laxed a little bit, the communication with counsel, but they are still in the vogue of very protectionism, and I think a lot of it has to do with fees. Everybody's very fee conscious and feels that the more information that they give you, the more it's going to cost their client. And while no doubt it doesn't help their case, it pleases their client until the end, when we can't give them the product that we need to.
Do you have any tips for when you feel that you're not getting all the information, or how to know if maybe you're not getting all the information and they're holding things back from you?
Well, I think that it falls back to what Howard said, and that is the pleadings are going to tell you a lot of information. And then from the pleadings, digging into specifically discovery. There's going to be mention, especially in going through deposition transcripts, documents that are referenced that would be good to obtain. So I think it's just a matter of ferreting out information and going through and seeing what is pertinent to that assignment, engagement.
And do a little bit of your own forensics, if you will, your own research, your own background, go on websites, research the case. I don't mean to promote, other sites, but I mean, go on Google, check out the names of the parties, check out the case itself, the name of the case. Again, go on Pacer and get all the necessary pleadings to get the background so that you get a better understanding of what's going on.
So I've got this case, and I thought I was able to do it, and I'm a sole practitioner, or maybe I've got a partner who does tax.
Mm-hmm.
How do I, what are some ways I could get those additional resources? Because I'm in the middle of it, and I realize it is a little different specialty, or a little more detailed than I'm accustomed to.
Well, that's why we're here, right?
Exactly.
To network.
Well, and then, I mean, that we laugh, but that is serious. I mean, that is one thing that I've found that is a wonderful piece of NACBA is I see people that I've seen for many years coming to these events, and it's not typically this is not an ego-driven group that beats their chest and says, I'm going to keep everything that comes in the door. I don't have a hesitation to pick up the phone and call Howard and say that I have a case. Who should I refer it to? I'm not going to give it to you. And so, so that, make sure that you do build that network to be able to pick up the phone and call someone.
And I've gotten calls from members, I don't know, particularly in this room, asking for advice on, certain issues. And I'm here to give it as well. If you have anything in particular, feel free to pick up the phone and call, and be happy to help.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for going out of your busy schedules and getting here early in the morning. We appreciate it.
With or without socks.
Well, he was in a rush.
Shouldn't ask me, I have an extra pair.
So thank you.
Thanks.
There might actually be a little more room this way. We need to, yeah.
Who's next?
Thanks.
First of all, I'm glad to say I do have socks. Mine are purple.
Mine are designer. Ooh. Well, good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
So we have Joe Petrocelli. It's a good Italian name, and I don't want to pronounce it right ever. And he's written a book on preventing fraud and mismanagement in government. And he's also you've got a seminar later today, right?
Yes, I do. At 4 o'clock when you all want to go home.
That's right. So instead of going home, listen to Joe. So obviously we're here to talk a little bit about preventing fraud and mismanagement in government.
So first of all, Joe, how do you assess fraud?
Well, it's interesting that a lot of people, when I speak, say government is different. Their accounting is different. And it's different because they like to move around money just like companies do. So for the past 20 years, I've been involved in government, trying to put systems in place. And it's a great forum because it shows that when you're slow moving, that fraud just kind of grows because people get complacent, people get very comfortable. So I came up I teach at a college, and my students are always highlighting in yellow. So one day I was talking to one of my wife's kids in her kindergarten. The kid's going, I go, why are you highlighting with different colors? And he goes, well, this is so I can learn words. And this is I have to know for the teacher. And it gave me an idea that I think we can all use when we do valuation work, when we do fraud work, and that is to color code as we go through the case. So for me, yellow is my overview. It's going to be the general information that I speak about whenever I'm writing. Then I go to my pink, and I always leave pink, and I didn't make it red, because remember, we never, ever find fraud. We find the facts that lead to fraud. Only a judge and a jury ultimately make the decision. I then go to my favorite one, which is green, because any of the risks assessments that I do is going to be people-based. One thing I love when I hear these management venues is like, management is going to manage people. No, you have to lead people. You have to have the right people if you want to do a true assessment of risk, because that is your greatest risk. I changed and I don't mean to speak like an accountant, that CPI I am, but that famous formula that was assets minus liabilities equals equity, I changed it to assets minus people equals equity, because who incurs liabilities? Who exposes us to liabilities? So you have to look at the people. Then I have the blue. Everything we think in as accountants, valuators, we can formalize into a formula. The problem is, everything's changing, the way we communicate, the way we approach things. There's nothing stagnated. So we were talking about this because it was like this morning, can you come up with 3 questions? And the first one I think is the most important one is to assess risk. It's an if and a then. If this happens, then this is going to be the result. I have changed it now to my spiritual thinking, which is like your principle base. What are the spiritualities that I feel that surround this risk that I'm looking at, rather than get concrete? So I use that, I call it, and then you hear the term critical thinking. I start my critical thinking in this broad sense, and then I get to the ultimate conclusion, which, by the way, I've just worked on a case study that's probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It was an auditor in Ohio, elected official, that signed 1 document, people, and went to jail for 2 years, and has now been trying to recover for 10. Mother of 6, because she was a licensed CPA, and she signed what they call a certificate of incumbency to give someone she thought was going to look up records. So remember, you are a licensed individual, you are certified people. You're up here when the majority of your peers are looking at you. So in your risk assessment, remember, you are looked at differently. So when you come to your conclusions, make sure they're documented. Make sure that you have the right information to back it. You know, it goes back to the general standards that even whether it's NAFCA or CPA, do professional care. So when you're doing your risk assessment, make sure that you take care in what you do. Make sure that you have the competency. You just heard it. You're on that witness stand, and that attorney is going to take you apart. He is going to try to, and I mean, we were laughing yesterday. I hate when those attorneys wear a bow tie. I have a hard time not laughing. The guy comes up there with this big polka dot bow tie. So that's why I wear purple socks. No, I'm okay. But the point is, if you don't have the competency, don't do the risk assessment, because they're difficult. You have to kind of go through a whole bunch of steps. You have to kind of take yourself outside. You can't live in a formula kind of thinking. So, you know, it's important to maintain what we call speed. We were talking about this. Right. Now, that doesn't mean I mean racing speed. I mean any process that you're doing where you're examining risk, you must keep a consistent speed. Because as you stop, people will do what? Complain. And they'll find excuses. But if you create milestones, you create specific points that have to be accomplished, and you don't accept, hey, I don't, you know, there's excuses, you get the plan done.
Makes sense. So, again, when I flipped through, it seemed like there were kind of 2 parts, doing the work and keeping yourself out of hot water.
Absolutely. Every one of us, once we put our name to something, has put an opinion out there. In the world of government, it's highly visible. In my town, if I go to a meeting and I open my mouth, the next day I find myself in the newspaper because I said something I wasn't supposed to say. You have to be willing to take the risk. And we were talking about valuation. You can use all the models, you can use all the things, but at the end of the day, it's your opinion. You're the one that's coming to those conclusions. You're the one that's going to be challenged. Same thing with risk. What was the basis for you to determine the risk. And remember, and we were talking about this, how many people know the 4 ingredients to find fraud? Is there anybody in this audience that knows the 4 things that must be present in order to find fraud? Do I have any volunteers? How about you, Greg? You know?
It's too early in the morning, though.
Material misrepresentation. Remember, there has to be a material misrepresentation, right? There has to be intent, there has to be reliance, and there has to be damage. All 4 of those things must be present. Well, let's talk about the first one. I say acceptance. What is the acceptance risk level that they're willing to accept? The second piece is intent. What are they trying to avoid? When you're looking at the risk assessment, what things are they avoiding? Transfer. Can I insure the risk? Is there other people that are better at it that can do quality control? You hear a lot of quality control management companies. And the last, and what I think is the most important, is the mitigation. How many people in this room believe you're always going to find fraud and stop it? I don't see one hand, and I would agree. Fraud is going to happen no matter how strong the system is, no matter how many things we try to do to fight it. Because why? It's based on people.
And are there systems that you can implement that will help prevent fraud?
Yes, human resources. The people you hire are going to be your safeguard. I don't believe that you can regulate people into morality. I don't think there's any policies, any procedures I can write that are going to make people ethical. So I believe that you have to have this, and in my first book, I talked about this 800-pound gorilla, not the one that pounces on you, but a spiritual gorilla that creates the right environment, a leadership environment that gets the youth to recognize that, hey, we want you to be thinking forward. We want new approaches. We want new ideas, and not thwarting that effort. And I think if you build a culture that works together, and not as one person, as a group advancing. So anything I would do would have like what I call a guiding force kind of group, like a bigger picture group that kind of pushes the whole team, so that if one person kind of gets a little bit tired, he doesn't feel alone, and he kind of goes along with the rest of them.
Well, and one of the big examples that we all heard about recently is Wells Fargo, right? With them opening up accounts, and that was really the culture that was set by the tone at the top and the goals that they gave them that really kind of drove that behavior. So that sounds like it goes to what you're saying about the people and the culture and the leader and what tone they're setting.
You have a problem. The problem is we all want to make money. We're all greedy. There's not one of you in this room that's not greedy. We all have greed. There's good greed and there's bad greed. So there, as soon as you said, we need a targeted sales number of X, or our stock price is going to go down. And one of the most interesting things I was at an audit conference, and I'm sitting next to like this auditor I respect, a government auditor, and he goes, you know, until I used to talk to you, I never thought about all the external factors. You know, and how many of you think about the external factors when you're in valuation? And I don't mean just the numbers economically. What external factors socially? What are the people thinking about? What kind of people are needed? Those are the kinds of things I think that are important.
Right, great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was really
Thank
informative.
you.
Thank
That
you,
was so
Joe.
awesome, Joe. So remember, Joe has a presentation this afternoon. I hope you all can make it. And now if we can have our correspondence, we're going to do a little chat about some of the programs yesterday. Let's see, how many of us are there? We've got a handheld if we run short for Michael. That's right. See, Michael and I got the power seats, you know. Yeah, right. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Along with Kathy Knapp, these are some of my favorite people, the correspondents on the show. If you're familiar with Around the Valuation World, often we do interviews. Sometimes we put together, mini presentations to, try to do some teaching or on topics of interest. And I can just tell you, these are knowledgeable. They're consummate professionals. They're just really good people to work with. And it makes my life trying to be a pseudo manager of this show so much easier. And frankly, I have to say that for Chinda and the staff. The NACVA really provides us great support, and you all benefit from it. So first, I've got Alan Zip.
Good morning. You got a fan club?
Good morning. Janae Castile, Melissa Gregg, and Michael Gregory, who was also up here yesterday. And so what we're going to do for the next, what do we got? About 10 minutes is just talk a little bit about the presentations yesterday. And this is going to be a little ad hoc. Did anybody feel particularly see one they really love? I mean, I saw yours, Alan.
Did you love it?
I did. Why don't you,
Fan club.
again, we've only got 10 minutes and I'd like to try to cover 2 or 3. But why
That's
don't
fine.
you take a minute or 2 and talk about it? And
Okay.
yeah.
First of all, this is a wonderful group. And the most important takeaways that I would tell all of you and encourage you is to get a piece of information that you can use in your practice. That's the most important thing of a meeting like this. We're all professionals. We all know 90% of what information is being given to us, but it's that 10%, that little nugget that you can take back. And I want to give you that right now to tell you what I intended yesterday to communicate in my session, which dealt with goodwill. It's this: look for guidance from authorities. And I mean the authorities are peers, us. In a court system is what I used as my authority to say that if the court has looked at the fact pattern, heard from 2 independent experts, and made an independent analysis and evaluation and decision, that is very, very important for us to see what is that guidance for us to use in the next case that we're going to have. And specifically, the issues that I identified was that goodwill is an asset. The Supreme Court said it's an asset of the business. Then the court goes further and it says that personal goodwill is not an asset of the business. That is a major takeaway right there, that personal goodwill does not belong to the corporation. This is in federal law. Then we look at state law, and we're all over the place. And what I showed you yesterday was 32 states treat personal goodwill one way, 14 states treat it another way, and everybody else does something differently. These are important takeaways so that you can look when you're dealing with a problem or a case that deals with goodwill, and you identify the personal element of the goodwill. Look to these cases for guidance on how you should treat it in your jurisdiction, whether it's a federal case, fair market value standard, a fair value standard, intrinsic value standard, whatever the standard is in your state. And I gave one anecdotal evidence yesterday that was very embarrassing to a very good friend of mine. We're both Maryland appraisers. We're both Maryland CPAs. We were in Virginia. Maryland uses a fair market value standard. We were in Virginia on a case. He used the fair market value standard, but the standard in Virginia was intrinsic value. At the end of the testimony, the judge rejected his opinion and accepted mine because I used the correct standard. I can only tell you that's the most important element, is you've got to know the facts of your case and the law that applies to you.
Alan, what I thought was interesting was, again, the way you showed a way to think through and layer the different layers of things that might impact the valuation depending on the jurisdiction and depending on the purpose and who we were speaking to. It was really
He
very
stayed awake during most of the session. I was
I
impressed.
did. So thank you.
Are you mic'd up?
Janae, yeah, did you?
I went to Peter Butler's yesterday, and maybe a lot of you went, but one thing, I've sat through a lot of his presentations and interviewed him on the show, and something that he brought up yesterday that I guess I haven't grasped onto previously was the arguments about how his total beta violates the CAPM. And I thought this was an interesting takeaway because if you really look at the assumptions of the efficient market hypothesis and portfolio theory, obviously the assumptions don't line up with what we're doing with privately held companies. So I thought it was interesting that he was kind of saying, well, yeah, this is a criticism, but obviously what we're doing anyway deviates. Maybe not, we can say deviates if you're more comfortable with that. Deviates from diversified portfolio and investors that are going to take into account tax issues that we simplify for CAPM. Obviously, there's so many different factors going on. We can't consider all of them, so we make some simplifying assumptions. So I thought it was an interesting takeaway.
I find his theories very interesting. I'm just always a little nervous about a black box.
Well,
I want to pretend I have some more input than that into it.
and that's with the total beta. It's not, that one's not a black box.
Okay. That's not
And I
a
do
black
think that's a
box
really, that's a great point, is to not, garbage in, garbage out. So know what you're doing. And I guess that's kind of a interest of mine, is getting into all the nitty gritty and understanding how things work. So I do think if you're going to use anything, you need to understand where it's coming from. I had an appraiser tell me, well, he made a point that he was using a market approach. He did a capitalization of earnings. He's like, well, it's a market approach because the data is from the market. I said, you don't understand what you're doing. So
Yeah, that's a tough argument. Melissa, did something jump out at you, or talk a little bit about some of your programs you're doing this week?
No, I just wandered around talking to people. No, just kidding. I attended, I think, Ido Walney's presentation on intentionally defective grantor trusts.
Okay.
I know, right? And I think I got a couple nuggets of information, but the overall issue that I realized was that I really need to always contact an attorney to have that discussion with a client. But what I wanted to know is just like in general, when we start to, because I've seen them and we've, looked at grats and grits and igrits and all of cruts and, and all of the, but I wanted to know a little bit more about this one. And I think the takeaway was that you can actually sell assets into the trust and only have like 10% of the equity of the assets that you sold in. So you could kind of get 10 times the assets in the trust. And then I would ask the attorney to explain the rest of it. But I think it was really, even if you go back and just kind of look at the presentation, I think to just be aware of some of the bigger issues when you have a client that has those. And then the key takeaway was that they need a valuation for any of those trusts. So I like that aspect of it as well.
It's
always
interesting,
good.
isn't it? Estate planning I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Which probably leads right into, Mike, what did you, what maybe caught your eye or ears yesterday?
I'm going to give you what I think are three good tidbits. I attended Neil Beaton's presentation on intangibles, and if you work in that area, download those slides. They were excellent. Virtually any point you need to know is in those slides, so it's extremely helpful. Second, Jim Aldering talked about the new book, DLAM Toolkit. He's also going to be a guest with Around the Valuation World in this month in June. He presented elements related to that book. It's the most current book on DLAMs. I've had a client with an issue out in Los Angeles. We resolved the issue. We pointed out these are the only DLAM studies that we have technical information behind them. The service had DLAM studies, didn't have that technical information. We were able to use that technical information to help resolve the case. So the analysis that's in that book and his presentation were right on point. The third item was with Randy Kessler yesterday on family law, and he made a comment, not only for us as business valuers to be there to help on resolving the issue through the process of mediation, but we might want to even consider ourselves getting mediation training and being able to act as a mediator given our business acumen. That's something you might want to think about if that's something you have an interest in. So I think those are three major takeaways I just wanted to share with you this morning.
Thank you. And I attended the buy-sell agreement session by Steve Egna. I probably mispronounced his name. And what he really spent a lot of time going through was, at least what I heard, was when you're doing a buy-sell agreement between partners, which often, I don't want to say are slapped together, because I have tried to do them with people back when I did a little bit of law. And, but they often are almost slapped together. Certainly the valuation provisions. Everybody just says, oh, we're going to do a fair market value. You know, if there's a dispute, we'll do a valuation and one of you will get bought out at a fair price. And, you know, that's the conversation often between the attorney and the clients. And then they get in a dispute and it comes to us. And, you know, obviously on a buy-sell, if there's a dispute, it could be affecting the performance of the business. So what's the valuation date? If there was a death and there was a life insurance policy that may have been paid out to the company, what's the valuation date? You know, all these things that you don't even think about. What's the standard? I regularly see fair market value in there, and I'm pretty convinced they probably meant something closer to fair value, especially if it's going to get litigated. You know, I don't really believe two 50-50 partners or 3 30-thirds partners meant to be putting in marketability discounts, at least unless you're really shooting for the sky on your numbers. So again, all these considerations that should just go into that provision of a buy-sell agreement that are, you know, so easily glossed over. So if you have clients who have buy-sell agreements, while you do, you know, as accountants, as CVAs, I would not advise trying to rewrite their agreements for them, but we certainly might want to be looking at that provision. And if it is something that will cause them problems should they need it, you know, maybe make suggestions towards cleaning up those paragraphs. So I thought that was really a good presentation.
Greg, in your practice, have you ever seen, or how often have you seen provisions where you do evaluation and one partner is wanting to leave, and so he gets a valuation, he offers a price, and the other partner can either accept that or buy the other partner out? Have you seen that a lot in your practice?
Yeah, we call those shotgun provisions. And depending, one of the first issues with any buy-sell agreement is, you know, once we file in court, it's a different ballgame in a lot of states. I recently just did a valuation on a company that had one of those provisions, and as soon as the other party filed in court, you know, the judge took over and it became a fair value. We're going through the court process. Forget about that. I think the guy got a few pennies more, but only because the business substantially improved in the year. Apparently the guy was so underperforming that in the year he wasn't there much, the company improved. So, yes. So we understood why the dispute was going on anyway. But other than that, he actually received a fair shotgun offer, but that's the other issue with it. Again, no matter what's written there, no matter how perfect it is, people can always file and go to court. And in some states, they'll honor it. Some states, it becomes, you know, a question of, was this fair? Did people know? So, you know, nothing is perfect, as I tell my clients about almost anything I'm involved in. With that, again, what I want to mention is Around the Valuation World is a monthly webinar for 2 hours. It's actually about 1 hour and 45 minutes because it's 2 continuing education hours. We bring a variety of people. We talk about things like this in a little more detail. We have, you know, 20 to 45 minute time slots. Yesterday, I talked about some of the kind of bigger names we've had on the show recently. But the other thing we try to do, I mean, we try to do some of the basics. We try to do some of the higher level straight, you know, valuation issues that are never going away, cost of capital, you know, how do you actually do market analysis that makes sense, you know, some of the basics but at a higher level that are never going away. But then we also try to bring people in to kind of broaden our horizon. Like you mentioned, Melissa, on the seminar you attended. People like that, we've recently had Chris Boucher, who was here yesterday, on intellectual property. It was fascinating. He's been involved in very large litigation, predominantly royalty type cases, but just a fascinating viewpoint of a world that I certainly don't spend time in. Randy Kessler, a world-renowned divorce attorney who is also here at this program. Actually, all these people are, I believe. He spoke on mediation in divorce. Again, it was a very interesting, timely viewpoint. Almost nice to hear a divorce attorney that would like good outcomes for the people involved. Steve Kirkland is going to be presenting on getting paid what you're worth. I think that's a topic close to all our hearts. We have Dermot O'Neill on valuation reviews, an area that seems to be expanding all the time. And of course, we're going to have Joe later in the year. So those are the types of programs. Again, on a accounting, you need continuing education hours. The way it works is if you listen to it live, it's 2 hours. There's recordings. You can go back and listen to any of them and get 2 hours. You can get up to 24 hours a year between those two methods. If you listen to 4 of them, then you get the 12 bonus hours. And I believe the usual price for members, assuming most of you members, is about $350. It's $195, I believe, through the end of the month. We work hard for you, try to bring you a nice variety, keep you up to date, keep you current.
Greg, I've got one more promotion for you.
Okay.
I'm kind of like an egghead. The most valuable part of the Around the Valuation World are the notes, the outlines, the detailed information that you get from the speakers. They may give you a 20-minute presentation, but a 200-page detailed outline of their substance of their material. That's all provided as well. And so you might use a lot of ink and paper, but it is so worthwhile for reference material. I did the interview of Randy Kessler a couple of months ago, and his material is outstanding, just outstanding. So there's a plug. And if you haven't signed up for it, well, try to do it. Try it one time. You'll see.
So thank you so much for getting up this morning and attending with us. I'm sure we'll see you in the next session, the morning keynote. And again, if you have any questions, if you have things you'd like to see on the show, please let us know. If you have comments, let us know. And have a wonderful day in Chicago. I'm not sure how you get out when we do a conference from 7 in the morning to 6 at night, but try to enjoy the beautiful weather also. So thank you.
Oh, yeah.